It was almost 2 in the morning when I made the mistake of opening that novel. I told myself I would read one chapter, just one. Instead, I kept scrolling, and with every page my patience thinned. The girl in the story happened to share my name. That should have been amusing, but it wasn't. She was reckless, emotionally and completely blind to the obvious. And worst of all, she wasn't even the real threat. She was just a stepping stone, written to fall so that the true villain could rise. Her name was Seraphina Valdren, the only daughter of a powerful marquess and the fiancée of Adrian Ravencrest. On paper, her future was flawless. A duchess title within reach, political protection, and an economic leverage strong enough to pressure entire territories. And yet Adrian loved someone else, a baron's daughter named Liliana Whitmore. Seraphina did not step aside when the shift became obvious. She stiffened and called it pride. I let out a quiet scoff. Not the proud, we know. When whispers spread about Adrian's shifting affection, Seraphina did not retreat. At first she tried humiliation. Subtle at the beginning, socially calculated. Liliana was placed in uncomfortable positions at gatherings, gently reminded of her lower birth, exposed to runes designed to make her feel small. It was all technically within noble decorum, sharp enough to wound, careful enough to deny accusation. The intention was obvious. If Liliana withdrew on her own, the problem would resolve itself. But she did not withdraw. If anything, Adrian's attention toward Liliana only strengthened. That was when Seraphina abandoned subtlety and chose poison, convinced that a quiet solution would succeed where humiliation had failed. If Liliana could not be pushed aside socially, then she would simply be removed. The attempt was meant to be discreet, a single tainted cup passed at the right moment during a crowded gathering. It did not unfold as planned. Liliana fell ill, but not fatally. Physicians were summoned. The cup was examined. A maid recalled who had arranged the serving order. Small details, insignificant alone, began to align under scrutiny. Once suspicion reached the Ravencrest household, the matter escalated beyond private control. Evidence was gathered. Witnesses were compelled to speak. And when the trail led back to Seraphina, noble law left no room for mercy. She was arrested formally, her title offering no protection once intent was established. I stared at the ceiling in silence. All of that, I said flatly, for a man who never chose you. She had grain contracts that fed half the empire. She had leverage powerful enough to destabilize Ravencrest's territory without lifting a finger. And she chose obsession. If I were her, I murmured coolly, I would end the engagement in front of everyone. Let him confess, then make him pay. My eyes closed slowly. I would never let it end like that. And that was the last thought I had before the world went dark. Asterisk, asterisk. When I woke, it was the silence that felt wrong first. Chapter 2, asterisk, asterisk. There was no distant traffic and no hum of electricity. The ceiling above me was unfamiliar, framed in carved wood and softened by sheer curtains that allowed warm sunlight to filter through. The air carried the faint scent of lavender. For several seconds I lay still. Then I lifted my hand into view. The fingers were slender, the skin pale and unscarred. Not my hand, not my room, not my life. A soft knock sounded at the door, and before I could fully process the situation, it opened. "Good morning, Lady Seraphina," the maid said with a practised bow. "The carriage to Ravencrest estate has been prepared." Ravencrest. The name struck with sudden clarity. I pushed myself upright too quickly, the room tilting before settling again. My heart was racing now, no longer sluggish with sleep, but sharp with awareness. Ravencrest. I asked carefully. "Yes, My lady, you instructed yesterday that you would depart early. Yesterday. I was still standing at the beginning of the fall, not at the prison gates, not at the trial, not yet ruined. I looked down at my left hand. A delicate engagement ring rested there, expensive and binding. Still engaged. Which meant this was before the poisoning, before the arrest, before the disgrace. A slow breath left me, somewhere between disbelief and laughter. Of course, this would happen to me. I had read enough transmigration stories to recognize the pattern. The unfamiliar body, the perfectly timed interruption, the preserved timeline. Ridiculous, and yet entirely real. "Tell me," I said, stopping the maid before she could withdraw, "has Lord Adrian confirmed his escort for the King's birthday gala?" The maid lowered her gaze. "It is said he will attend with Lady Whitmore, my lady." Good. Humiliation phase. Still salvageable. "And there has been no incident?" I asked. "No accusation. No scandal." The maid looked confused by the question. "No, my lady." Relief settled in fully then, steady and almost exhilarating. It was still fixable. Everything had not yet collapsed. "Cancel the carriage," I said at last. The maid blinked in surprise. "My lady, I will not be visiting Ravencrest today." There was a brief pause, just long enough to register shock, before she bowed again. "As you wish." When the door closed, I rose and crossed to the mirror. Silver blonde hair framed a face that was elegant even in stillness. Composed, controlled, capable, alive. I studied my reflection carefully, searching for panic, for hysteria, for weakness. Instead, I found an opportunity. "You had all this," I murmured to the woman in the glass. "And you still chose ruin. Unacceptable. A marquis's daughter does not chase a man who has already chosen elsewhere. And I certainly do not follow a script written to destroy me." Another knock interrupted my thoughts. "Lady Seraphina," the maid said from beyond the door, "breakfast is prepared." Of course it was. Routine did not pause for personal collapse. I adjusted my sleeves and stepped into the corridor. Servants bowed as I passed, their movements practiced and precise. This estate did not revolve around emotion. It revolved around structure. Power lived here. When I entered the dining hall, father was already seated at the head of the table. Mother sat beside him, posture composed as always. Neither spoke immediately. Father studied me the way he reviewed contracts quietly, thoroughly. After a moment he began. "I was informed you requested a carriage to Ravencrest Estate this morning." "Yes, I did," I answered calmly as I took my seat. "And yet," he continued, "you did not depart." I reconsidered. His gaze sharpened slightly. "You intended to discuss the King's birthday gala with Lord Adrian." "No," I corrected evenly. "I intended to ask why he is attending with Liliana instead of me." The temperature in the room shifted. Father's expression hardened. "He chose to dance with Lady Whitmore first at the previous gala," he said, his voice no longer neutral. "In front of the court. I remember." He exhaled slowly, the restraint in his posture thinning. "Please reconsider this attachment. My child. He is not worth it. We will pay the penalty and end this engagement." Mother remained silent, but her fingers tightened slightly around her teacup. Inwardly I understood what this meant. Father had never approved of this engagement. He had agreed only because Seraphina had insisted with stubborn certainty. He had seen the imbalance long before she had. "I have no wish to continue this engagement," I said at last. He gave a small nod, relief almost visible. "But we will not pay the penalty." That erased the relief immediately. His eyes sharpened. "And how," father asked, his voice steady but sharper now, "do you intend to avoid it?" At the King's birthday gala I answered, meeting his eyes directly, Lord Adrian will attend publicly with Lady Whitmore. He will confirm the breach himself. Silence settled over the table. Father studied me for a long moment, no longer as a concerned parent, but as the head of House Valdren, measuring risk. He had been disappointed these past months. Seraphina's infatuation had clouded her judgment. Grain contracts had been adjusted impulsively. Negotiations had been softened for the sake of appearances. He had considered transferring the family business to one of my cousins, someone steadier, less sentimental. I had seen it in the way he observed rather than advised. Now he was observing again. Not my emotions, but my strategy. If I mishandled this, I would confirm his doubts. If I succeeded, I would erase them. At last he spoke. I will be watching. Nothing more. No reassurance. No warning. A test. Breakfast resumed, but the atmosphere had shifted. They were no longer watching a daughter clinging to affection. They were watching to see whether I could carry the Valdren name properly. After breakfast I did not return to my chambers. If fate had truly dropped me into this world, then I refused to spend my first day trapped in corridors meant for a woman waiting to be chosen. The capital was said to be beautiful in spring. I intended to see it for myself. The carriage carried me through the main district, and for once I allowed myself to look without calculation. The architecture rose in pale stone arches. Balconies curved outward with wrought iron detail. Silk banners drifted lazily between buildings. It was old-world elegance without apology. I stepped down near the central promenade and dismissed the carriage. I will return later, I told my maid. For now I walk. Shops lined the streets, their windows displaying gowns in deep jewel tones and embroidered gloves stitched with gold thread. I entered one without hesitation. The seamstress nearly panicked when she recognized me, but I waved off her formalities. "I'm browsing," I said calmly, "not declaring war." She laughed nervously. For the first time since waking in this body, I tried on dresses without comparison. No copying soft lace. No shrinking silhouettes. I selected fabrics that enhanced structure instead of hiding it. If I were Seraphina Valdren, I would look like it. After purchasing more than necessary, I continued down the street and stopped at a pastry stall. The scent of sugar and butter was almost excessive. I ordered two, and that was when I heard his voice. "Seraphina." I turned slowly. Adrian Ravencrest stood a short distance away, dressed impeccably as always. One hand rested lightly at the small of Liliana Whitmore's back, possessive enough to be intentional, subtle enough to be denied. She stood close to him, closer than decorum required, her fingers loosely curled around his sleeve as though it were the most natural place for her hand to be. So this was how they spent their afternoons. Publicly, comfortably, bold, interesting. Adrian approached first, though he did not remove his hand from her. "I did not expect to see you here," he said, his tone smooth, almost amused. "I imagine you didn't," I replied. Liliana's grip on his sleeve tightened slightly before she stepped forward half a pace, enough to remain within his shadow. "Lady Seraphina," she said gently, lowering her gaze. "What a pleasant surprise. We rarely see you outside formal settings." The implication was soft. "You don't belong here." I studied her without reacting. "It appears I interrupted something," I said calmly. Adrian's fingers shifted subtly at her waist. "We were merely discussing the upcoming gala," he said. "In the marketplace." I asked, "Over pastries?" He smiled faintly. "Must every conversation require an audience chamber?" Liliana laughed quietly, as if he had said something charming rather than dismissive. I insisted we walked through the market. She added sweetly, "Lord Adrian has been so busy with estate matters." I thought a simple afternoon might ease his burdens. Her hand slid from his sleeve to rest more confidently against his arm. Comfortable, familiar, deliberate. I took a slow bite of my pastry before answering. "How thoughtful of you," I said evenly. Adrian watched me carefully now, gauging my reaction. "You must understand," he began, voice shifting into that diplomatic register he favored, "alliances require flexibility. Public perception does not always reflect private arrangements. And this," I gesture lightly toward them, "is flexibility." His jaw tightened slightly. "You are overreacting." Liliana tilted her head, her expression almost sympathetic. "If my presence creates discomfort," she said softly, "I can withdraw. I would never wish to stand between you." She did not move, not even slightly. The provocation was elegant. She positioned herself as generous while remaining exactly where she wanted to be. I felt irritation rise sharp, immediate, undeniably mine. The original Seraphina would have snapped. I did not. "You misunderstand," I said coolly. "You cannot stand between what has already drifted apart." Adrian's expression hardened. "Be careful, Seraphina." "Of what?" "Of embarrassing yourself." There it was. Not the public display, not the intimacy. That line, as though I were the unstable one, as though I were clinging to something he had already discarded. For half a second I considered saying exactly what I thought. Not here, not now. The gala would be far more effective. Instead I smiled. Slowly. "You are right," I said. "I would not wish to embarrass myself." Liliana visibly relaxed. Adrian's posture eased. They thought I had conceded. Good. Let them enjoy their afternoon. The stage would be much larger soon. I finished the pastry and handed the empty paper to a nearby servant. "I hope you enjoy the gala," I added calmly. "Public events tend to clarify many things." Adrian frowned faintly. "What does that mean?" "You will see." I turned without waiting for a reply. Behind me I could hear Liliana's whisper, "She seems different." Adrian answered quietly, but I still heard it. "She is upset. It will pass." No, it would not. As I walked away, irritation cooled into something sharper. Originally, I had intended to dissolve the engagement cleanly, strategically, without personal investment. But now he had crossed a line, not because he loved another woman, but because he assumed I would endure it quietly. He assumed I was the same woman who chased him. He assumed wrong. I stepped into the carriage and gave a single instruction: Blackwood Estate. The driver did not question it. If Adrian wanted public clarity, I would give him more than he expected. I was made to wait. As the carriage rolled toward Blackwood Estate, my earlier irritation faded into something far more interesting. It was time to meet my so-called Prince Charming. In the original story, Cale Blackwood eventually became the hero's combat instructor. The man was known for discipline, battlefield precision, and an alarming number of training scenes that seemed entirely unnecessary for plot progression. I remembered those illustrations far too clearly. Broad shoulders, controlled posture, a build that suggested both restraint and damage. I shifted slightly in my seat. Right. Focus. Still, if fate insisted on dropping me into a novel, the least it could do was improve the casting. I leaned back against the carriage cushion, allowing myself a moment of imagination. If I was going to rewrite this story, I might as well upgrade the romantic subplot properly. The carriage slowed. I composed myself fully before stepping down. Prince Charming. Let's see if the illustrations did you justice. Prince Charming, it seemed, had no intention of rewarding anticipation. I was escorted into a sitting chamber and left there with polite efficiency. Tea was served. The door closed. Silence followed. 5 minutes passed. Then 10. Then enough time for the cooling porcelain in my hands to grow noticeably lukewarm. A servant entered once to refill a cup that did not require refilling. Another adjusted curtains that were already perfectly aligned. The performance was subtle but intentional. The message was unmistakable. Viscount Blackwood did not hurry for anyone, especially not for a woman rumored to be hopelessly attached to another man. I set the teacup down without touching it again. So this was his opening move. Interesting. He wished to establish distance, superiority, disinterest. Fair. If I had heard the same rumors about myself, I might have done worse. When the door finally opened again, I did not rise immediately. Let him step into the room first. Let him measure what he expected to see, and let him be disappointed. He arrived exactly when the insult had settled. "Lady Seraphina," Cale said as he entered, offering a proper but distant bow. "We were not informed of your arrival." His tone was smooth, polite, intentionally cool. "I prefer efficiency over announcements," I replied, returning the greeting without warmth. He took his seat across from me, but did not relax into it. "You requested a meeting," he said. "For what purpose?" He was waiting for justification. Instead of answering his question, I folded my hands calmly on my lap and said, "I want you to escort me to the King's birthday gala." For the first time something shifted in his expression. It was subtle, a tightening around the eyes. Not shock, irritation. First, I had ignored his question. Second, I had spoken as though the matter were already decided. "Lady Seraphina," Cale said evenly, "you are aware that you are engaged." "Yes." "And you are aware that accompanying an engaged woman to a royal gala is inappropriate." "Yes." He studied me carefully now. "And you believe I would accept such an offer?" "Yes." There was no hesitation in my voice. That seemed to unsettle him more than defiance would have. "And why," he asked slowly, "would you assume that?" I tilted my head slightly. "What if I said Valdren would provide Blackwood territory with a 30% grain discount for the next 10 years?" Silence. Not polite silence. Calculating silence. Cale leaned back slightly in his chair, and this time the irritation was replaced by assessment. 30%, he repeated. "For 10 years." "Yes." He did not respond immediately. Instead, he asked, "And what assistance do you require in return?" "Presence," I replied. "And timing." His gaze sharpened. "You are playing something." "Yes." "And you require my cooperation to execute it." "Yes." He exhaled quietly through his nose, something between resignation and reluctant admiration. "You are aware," he said, "that dukedoms do not forget public humiliation." "I am counting on that," I answered. That answer held. A long pause followed. Finally Cale rose from his seat. "I will attend the gala with you," he said. "Under one condition." I waited. "My household will send a gown. You will wear it. We will not appear mismatched." Control. Image management. Reasonable. "Very well," I replied. "Send it." He inclined his head slightly. "Then I will see you at the gala." As I turned to leave, he added, almost as an afterthought, "Lady Seraphina." I paused. "Do not mistake this for indulgence," he said. "This is negotiation." "I never mistake negotiation for affection," I replied calmly. That earned the faintest hint of reaction. Not a smile, but something close. When I returned home, father was waiting in his study. "You were at Blackwood Estate," he said without preamble. "Yes." "And—" "I secured an escort." His eyes narrowed slightly. "At what cost?" 30% grain discount for 10 years." Silence. "And—" You negotiated boldly, he said. I negotiated efficiently. Mother entered shortly after, concern evident despite her composed exterior. "Are we to expect backlash?" she asked. "Yes," I answered, "but not from our side." Father watched me carefully. "You are certain?" "I do not require worry," I said evenly. "Only preparation." That seemed to satisfy him. The engagement would end. But it would end on my terms. 2 days before the gala I sent a formal request to the palace. Not to the king, to the queen. The distinction mattered. The king handled declarations. The queen understood consequences. Her reply did not arrive in writing. Instead, I received a discreet summons to her private garden chamber that afternoon. The chamber was enclosed in glass and ironwork, and sunlight filtered through climbing vines. The air was warm but controlled. Nothing in that space was accidental. The queen was already seated when I entered. I bowed properly. "Your Majesty." She observed me for several seconds before speaking. "I was told you requested a private audience," she said calmly. "That alone suggests urgency." "It suggests preparation," I replied. Her eyes sharpened slightly. "Preparation for what?" "For a public dissolution," I said plainly. "I intend to request the termination of my engagement at the gala." She did not react immediately. Instead, she asked, "And why choose such a public stage?" "Because the breach will not originate from my side," I answered. "It must be witnessed." The Queen studied me carefully. "You are confident Lord Ravenscrest will expose himself?" "Yes." "You tolerated his conduct for months." "I will not tolerate it further." Silence stretched between us. Finally she asked, "What role do you expect me to play?" "I expect nothing improper," I said evenly. "Only that imperial law be applied without favoritism." She rose and walked slowly toward the window. "Ravencrest is influential," she said. "The dukedom heir does not fall easily." "Influence does not exempt contract," I replied. She turned slightly toward me. "And you are certain this is not wounded pride?" "If it were pride," I said calmly, "I would have confronted him privately." That seemed to satisfy her. "If Lord Ravenscrest confirms his preference publicly," the Queen said at last, "I will not obstruct enforcement." That was not a promise of support. It was permission for consequence. I bowed once more before leaving. I did not return home immediately. Instead, I arranged quiet meetings with 3 minor noble houses whose trade routes relied more on Valdren stability than Ravenscrest favor. I did not ask for alliances. I did not request declarations. We spoke about harvest projections, shipping reliability, and long-term supply guarantees. We reviewed grain forecasts and discussed the impact of unpredictable commodity pricing. No one mentioned Adrian. No one mentioned the gala. They did not need to. By the time I returned home that evening, several households had quietly recalculated where their security truly lay. No banners had shifted publicly. No oaths had been exchanged. But when the gala arrived, I would not be standing alone. And when Adrian chose to speak, he would not be speaking to a sympathetic room. Blackwood's carriage arrived precisely at the appointed hour. Not early, not late. Cale stepped down first, dressed in formal black with restrained silver accents that mirrored the tones of my gown. The coordination was deliberate, but not excessive. When I began descending the estate steps, his gaze lifted toward me. It stopped. Not obviously. Not long enough to be rude, but long enough. He did not speak at once. And there it is. For a fraction of a second, something flickered in his eyes as something unscripted. But, oh, that was satisfying. Do not smile. Do not smile. Maintain composure. You are marble. You are a strategy. You are not a girl preening because a man forgot his next line. Still, if composure had a heartbeat, mine would have been laughing. I paused one step above him and regarded him evenly. "Viscount," I said. He seemed to recover then. "Lady Seraphina." His eyes moved once more, slower this time, taking in the clean lines of the gown, the absence of softness, the deliberate structure. "Yes. Look properly. Understand what you are standing beside tonight." I tilted my head slightly. "Are you mesmerized," I asked calmly, "or recalculating your political investment?" His jaw tightened faintly, though his expression remained controlled. "Do not flatter yourself," he replied. "I was confirming that my household's selection was appropriate." "Appropriate," I repeated. "That sounds underwhelmed." He stepped closer and extended his hand to assist me into the carriage. "Appropriate," he clarified, "means effective." I accepted his hand. "Effective will suffice," I said. Inside the carriage, silence settled between us as the wheels began moving over stone. "You are aware," Cale said after a moment, "that the Raven Crest will not remain passive after tonight." "I expect a reaction," I replied. "And if that reaction exceeds reputation damage, then we respond proportionally." He studied me carefully before looking forward again. "You are certain this is not emotion guiding you?" "If it were emotion," I said evenly, "I would have confronted him yesterday in the marketplace." That answer seemed to settle something. "Very well," he said. The palace gates came into view as the carriage slowed. Music drifted faintly from within the grand hall. Tonight would not be chaotic. It would be structured, and structure favors preparation. When the carriage door opened and the murmur of gathered nobles reached us, Cale stepped out first and turned to offer his hand. I accepted it. Together we entered the palace. When we entered the ballroom, the reaction was immediate. Conversations did not stop entirely, but they faltered. Heads turned in waves, curiosity spreading faster than music could resume its rhythm. I was used to being seen. I was not used to being examined. "Is that Lady Seraphina?" someone whispered not far from the staircase. "She has never dressed like that before. She always wore softer gowns." "She looks different." "She always looked this good." The murmurs were not cruel. They were surprised. Cale did not look at me, but his hand remained steady at my side as we descended. Across the hall, Adrian stood beside Liliana. His expression shifted the moment he recognized us. First surprise, then displeasure. He had expected me to attend, perhaps, but not like this, and certainly not beside another man. He could not object openly. He stood there with Liliana at his side, and any accusation would expose his own position. So he remained silent. For a moment I wondered whether he would approach. He did not. Instead, someone else spoke first. Lady Marielle, a minor noblewoman known for her open admiration of Cale, stepped forward with a thin smile. "Well," she said loudly enough to draw attention, "Lady Seraphina, even though you are engaged, you arrive escorted by another gentleman." How bold! Her eyes lingered on Cale longer than necessary. Jealousy makes people careless. In the original story, Seraphina would have flared at the insult. I did not. I turned toward her calmly. "What choice did I have?" I'd asked. The room quieted slightly. "A month ago," I continued, "I sent a formal letter to my fiancé requesting that he escort me to the king's birthday gala. I let the pause settle before adding, 'He declined.' A ripple moved through the surrounding nobles. And instead, I said evenly, he chose to attend with his mistress." The word landed sharply. Liliana's expression shifted instantly. Her eyes widened, and she stepped half a pace behind Adrian as though wounded. "Lady Seraphina," she said softly, her voice trembling with careful restraint, "I never intended to cause pain. I only wished to avoid misunderstandings." Adrian's composure cracked slightly. "That is enough," he said sharply. "There is no need for such language. The language—" I asked calmly, "You stand publicly with Lady Whitmore." Cale remained silent, but his presence beside me was unmistakable. Before Adrian could respond further, a new voice entered the conversation. Lord Ravencrest. The Queen. Cale's aunt stepped forward from the elevated section of the hall, her gaze sharp and unwavering. "You attend this celebration," she said evenly, "with a lady who is not your betrothed." The entire hall had fallen silent now. Adrian bowed slightly. "Your Majesty, I—" The Queen did not allow him to continue immediately. Her eyes moved to Liliana. "Lady Whitmore," she said, "you are aware that Lord Ravencrest is formally engaged." Liliana lowered her gaze. "Yes, your Majesty." "And yet," the Queen continued, "you stand beside him publicly." Murmurs rose from the crowd. "Shameless," "How improper," "Pomrecher." The words spread in quiet waves. Liliana's composure wavered visibly. Adrian's pride overtook caution. "I invited her," he declared. "And I do not deny it. I am in love with Lady Whitmore." Gasps moved through the hall. There it was. Clear, public, unmistakable. I stepped forward, bowing properly toward the king. "Your Majesty," I said steadily, "as witnessed by this assembly, House Ravencrest has breached the formal engagement contract recognized under imperial law." The king's expression remained neutral, but attentive. "I therefore request that the engagement be dissolved publicly," I continued, "and that the contractual penalty be enforced upon the breaching party." Adrian turned toward me in disbelief. "Seraphina—" The king raised his hand, silencing him. "Is your declaration inaccurate?" the king asked. Adrian hesitated. "No, your Majesty." "Then the matter will be reviewed and enforced according to imperial statute," the king said calmly. "The law applies to all houses equally, even dukedoms." The decision was sealed. Music resumed slowly. Conversations reignited, but not as before. Adrian stood rigid, his authority diminished in a single exchange. Liliana clung closer to him now, no longer delicate but defensive. Cale extended his hand toward me. "Shall we?" he asked quietly. "Uh, oh no. Why does that look unfairly perfect?" "This is it. This is the moment every foolish girl in ballads dreams of. If I die tonight, at least I die having experienced this once. Control yourself. You are not 12." "Yes," I replied. As we stepped onto the dance floor, the whispers followed us. His hand settled at my waist. "I am not thinking about how easily he holds me. I'm not. Not of pity, not of scandal, but of consequence. And yet, if someone painted this moment, I would pretend not to buy the portrait. But I would absolutely hide it in my room. But of consequence." The gala ended, and the engagement dissolved. The penalty was paid. The House Ravencrest did not respond publicly. They did not argue. They did not challenge the king's ruling. They bowed, they paid, and they remembered. Humiliation does not disappear. It festers. Blackwood territory became my focus soon after. If Valdren grain strengthened Blackwood lands, then the Ravencrest influence would weaken naturally. It was not revenge. It was balanced. The land in Blackwood suffered from unstable irrigation. During dry months, crops withered. During heavy rains, the fields flooded. Temporary repairs had been attempted for years, but none lasted. So I proposed something permanent in dams, canals, controlled water distribution. At first, the council resisted. "This is too costly," one member said. "It is too ambitious," another added. "Lady Valdren has no engineering experience." Cale did not silence them. He let me speak. I explained water flow ratios, soil retention, and long-term yield stabilization. Gradually, resistance softened. Construction began. The first month went smoothly. Stone foundations were laid. Workers were organized. Water was redirected carefully. For the first time, hope spread through the farmlands. Then one night everything changed. A section of the early canal wall collapsed. Not cracked. Collapsed completely. The damage was unnatural. Precision cuts marked the structural support beams. This was not erosion. It was sabotage. Flooding ruined 3 nearby fields. Farmers panicked. Rumors spread immediately: outsider meddling, Valdren arrogance, disaster brought by ambition. By morning, doubt had returned stronger than before. Cale stood beside me as we surveyed the damage. "This was deliberate," he said quietly. "Yes." His jaw tightened. "Raven crest. Most likely. There was no proof. Only timing. Only motive. That evening the council met again. "Your plan is unstable," one said sharply. "This territory cannot afford experiments." I listened, then stood. "If we retreat now," I said steadily, "we confirm weakness. If this was sabotage, then retreat is exactly what they want." Silence followed. Cale spoke next. "We continue." His voice was firm, not emotional. Firm. That mattered. Still, the damage had consequences. Merchants hesitated to extend credit. Workers grew anxious. Some farmers questioned my competence openly. For the first time since waking in this world, doubt crept in. That night, alone in the study, I stared at revised calculations. Had I overlooked something? Had I underestimated retaliation? The door opened quietly. Cale entered. "You are recalculating," he observed. "Yes. You think this is your fault." I did not answer immediately. "Leadership means the burden is mine," I said at last. He stepped closer. "No," he replied calmly. "This is not failure. It is resistance." He placed a merchant report before me. Irregular timber purchases traced to a Raven Crest affiliated supplier. There it was. Not enough for the court. Enough for certainty. They expected collapse, he said. "Then we deny them satisfaction," I replied. Security increased. Supply chains shifted. The damaged canal was rebuilt using reinforced stone instead of timber. Slower, more expensive, stronger. 2 weeks later, heavy rain returned. Water levels rose. Pressure built against the dam walls. "If this fails," Cale said quietly beside me, "confidence collapses." "It will hold," I answered. The structure trembled but did not break. Fields remained intact. Word spread quickly. "Blackwood stands." Confidence returned stronger than before. Ravencrest attempted one final maneuver, rumors that Valdren sought control over Blackwood to weaken the Duke Edum's influence. This time the defense came from the farmers themselves. She rebuilt after sabotage. She stayed. She didn't flee. Respect earned through struggle lasts longer than respect earned through elegance. The second harvest exceeded projections. The third surpassed even that. Grain prices stabilized. Blackwood's influence strengthened. Raven Crest's leverage weakened. Months later, Cale stood beside me overlooking the completed dam. "You could have walked away after the sabotage," he said quietly. "Yes." "But you stayed." "Yes." "Why?" "Because leaving would mean they were right," I answered. "And because I do not build things I intend to abandon." His expression changed then, not political admiration, but something deeper. Years passed without collapse. 6 years after the gala, we married, not because of the alliance, not because of necessity, but because the partnership had already been proven. 3 children were born into a territory stabilized by resilience and deliberate choice. Sometimes, watching them run along the canal paths at sunset, I remember the other version of this story of the one where humiliation led to ruin. I was given the same stage, the same temptation, but I chose differently, not because I was colder, because I understood leverage. And dignity, once chosen, becomes habit. I did not defeat Raven Crest through revenge. I outgrew them, and in doing so I rewrote the ending.